Meet Brian Griffin, Quahog's not-so-good boy with a martini in one paw and a half-baked novel in the other. And when you mix his inflated ego with his questionable life choices, well, you get this.
Not a cat.
But trust me, it gets so much worse. From broken bones to broken hearts and everything in between, I took a serious plunge into some of the worst things that have happened to Brian. Starting with Brian the Closer, where Brian decides to enter the cutthroat world of real estate.
Welcome home.
Ah, hey there. I've been looking all over for you.
That's why you've been hiding from me in this motel?
Maybe just stick to day drinking, huh, bud? The episode starts innocently enough. Brian and Peter are watching TV when Peter finds Brian's old rope toy on the sofa. But this innocent object quickly becomes the source of pain when Peter becomes fixated on it. Dude goes full Gollum and a ridiculous tug of war ensues, which escalates very quickly into this dental disaster.
My teeth!
My own teeth just tingled in sympathy. Anyway, that alone earned a spot on this list. This looks pretty frickin' bad. That evening, Brian joins the family at dinner where he's feeling a little self-conscious, but the Griffins in their infinite wisdom decide to make him feel even worse. Stu compares him to a wild animal while Lois practically calls him repulsive before refusing to pay for a dog dentist. Peter's the worst in my opinion because he tosses the rope toy at Brian, saying he's bored with it. I mean, the nerve! He storms off to drown his sorrows of the clam, where Quagmire gets tired of Brian bumming him out and offers him a solution.
Take this.
What is this?
That's my dentist. He'll bill me. I've got an account. He sells me nitrous at wholesale. I bang his wife.
Talk about a win-win. Brian, desperate and deformed, agrees, ignoring the levels of shade emitting from this dodgy setup. Fast forward to the lounge where the Griffin clan awaits the reveal of Brian's new chompers, and those are definitely something. But apparently everyone else likes them, saying he looks like a movie star. Even Stewie throws a compliment in his way. Now Brian feels like a new dog, the big dog on campus, confident and happy enough to warrant an upbeat Sinatra montage. This brief moment of happiness makes everything that happens later sting even more. But I digress. Brian's confidence accidentally leads him to a new career where he gets mistaken for a real estate agent. He gets a couple to close on a house by accident just before the real agent with suspiciously similar teeth gets there. Calling him a natural, he offers him a gig where Brian's cheesy charm and willingness to ignore clear red flags really come in handy. In fact, he's so successful that his boss makes him an offer.
I can sell anything.
Well, we got this crap condo down by the marina. You find some sucker to buy it, and I'll make you partner.
All right, sounds good.
Sure does. Especially if you're not the poor sucker he has to bamboozle. Later at the bar, Brian's racking his head about who said sucker could be when he overhears Quagmire's offer to buy the gang's beer for the night. Apparently, he's got a big bonus to blow through, and Brian immediately sees the opportunity. Dude is the reason he even has a career, but okay. Brian then gets to work convincing his mark to buy the awful condo, downplaying its flaws and overselling its non-existent benefits. To quell Quagmire's fears about buying a place without seeing it first, Brian gaslights him.
Of course not. I wouldn't expect you to, because there's another buyer who's about to snap it up. I think he's a pilot for Delta?
Brian should just change his name to Judas at this point. Quagmire, looking to get a one-over on his apparent nemesis, takes the place. Next thing you know, he and the boys are loaded up in the car, ready to help him move into his new seaside condo. But when they arrive, it quickly dawns on them that this place is a straight-up dump. But Peter's not one for giving in so quickly and tries to look on the bright side.
This is a dump!
Well, maybe it's still got a nice ocean view.
The harbor is poisoned. Brian screwed me!
That's why I've never made any major investments with my dog.
Needless to say, Q-Dog is pissed, but they read the contract and discover that he's got 72 hours to undo this mess. So they head off to Quahog Realties to find that lion, Brian, but surprise, surprise, the receptionist says he's not in. Like the coward that he is, it turns out that Brian is hiding in the air vents. He does his best to avoid Quagmire till the shoddy deal is sealed, eventually ending up at a hotel, which is pretty dumb considering Quagmire's sleazy lifestyle, and unsurprisingly, Brian finds him there waiting to confront him. Revealing he knows about the 72-hour deal, Brian then feigns regret, saying he's the only one to offer to help him, and he's a good guy, which Quagmire seems to be falling for. Then Brian's alarm goes off, indicating that the 72 hours have passed, but his gleeful celebration is cut short when Quagmire does this.
You son of a...
Guess he didn't have the teeth to cut it in real estate. Yeah, it's cool. I'll let myself out. And jump straight into Brian's next horror, Barely Legal. A title that's almost as uncomfortable as the episode itself. I mean, that phrase gives me the same level of ick that Brian gets from his new, admirer.
Morning, cutie.
Hey.
I had so much fun last night, Brian. Hey, I thought maybe we can go get some coffee later.
I don't think so.
Wow, okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Brian gets a call from his on-again, off-again girlfriend Jillian, inviting him over for a movie. Sweet gal, but she's about as bright as a burnt-out bulb, which Stewie mocks while casually eavesdropping. Then Meg barges in, bawling her eyes out because her school dance is coming up and no one wants to go with her. Brian tries to comfort her, unsuccessfully, and when she threatens to unalive herself, he says,
All right, Meg, look, what if I drove you and walked in with you?
Brian, will you go with me?
Are you gonna kill yourself if I don't?
Yeah.
Brian is definitely going to regret this. Meg's overjoyed, hugging him and making plans to go dress shopping. On the big day, Brian's easing his anxiety with a hip flask, and Lois takes pictures while they wait for Meg's big entrance. The odd couple gets to dance where Brian continues hitting the hip flask like it owes him money. The booze must be doing its thing though, because he's way too mean to Meg's bully.
You don't deserve all the crap you get, Meg. You know that?
Thanks, Brian.
Someone call Chris Hansen, because this all seems pretty illegal. The next morning, Brian's hangover and Stewie's jabs are the least of his worries, because Meg's acting like they're an actual item. Remember that regret I mentioned? Brian finally realizes his colossal mistake, but tries to downplay it. Again, Stewie's living for the drama, having a field day with the suffering. Later, when Meg shoots her a shot and asks Brian out, he responds by coming out of the closet. But she's not letting up.
I'm going to the mall later. Maybe you can come and help me pick out some underwear.
I have plans, with Chris.
Chris? Oh boy, he's desperate. Unfortunately, Chris plans to get intimate with himself that afternoon, so that's a no. Eventually, Meg asks Lois if they could hit the mall, and she agrees. Brian's trying to keep his crime under wraps here, so he pushes Meg out of the house before she can spill the beans. At the mall, the levels of cringe keep rising as she introduces Brian to her friends, who are also children. Cornered, Brian pulls out the fake girlfriend shtick and tells Meg he's dating Jillian. Meg takes the news well, at least until Brian turns his back and she clearly snaps. A few days later, everything seems peachy. She even bakes Brian a thank you pie. He's loving it until she casually reveals the secret ingredient.
My hair.
What?
My hair is in the pie, Brian. And now it's inside of you. Do you feel me, Brian? Do you feel me inside of you?
Guess that's what you get for kissing kids, Brian. But truth be told, this is a biohazard, one that forces Brian to finally come clean to Lois about Meg's behavior and his own faux pas at the dance that night. After throwing some more hands, Lois tells him to go upstairs and fix this, you know, like an adult. Brian walks into Meg's room to find a creepy shrine in his honor. Instead of panicking, he air quotes breaks up with her and leaves. We see that this wasn't the best move because later, this goes down. She's just going all the way with this stalker thing, huh? Love to see a woman in a male-dominated field. Oh, and during all this, Peter and his crew become police officers because of course they do. Anyway, Lois sends them on a rescue mission after Chris reports seeing Meg stuff Brian in the trunk and take off. And boy, does Brian need rescuing, because Meg's got him all sorts of tied up in a chair as she gets ready to take advantage of the situation at hand. You know, both of them are just absolutely detestable here. This entire scenario is painfully awful. Thankfully, just as he straddles him, the ragtag cavalry arrives and Lois tries to appeal to her overly obsessed daughter, but she's not having it.
I've never been more certain about anything in my life. I need him.
You don't know what you need.
I know what she needs.
Oh, come on! Him? I legit feel a pang of guilt when Quagmire makes Meg feel better by giving her a heartfelt talk about not rushing to grow up. Out of all the people! While Meg's getting life lessons from Quagmire, Brian's over here getting life lessons from just being a fracking jerk. In Brian Portrait of a Dog, where his reluctant dog show gig takes a turn after an argument with Peter forces him to confront reality on all fours.
Okay, I'm a crazy animal. All right, who wants to be next? You?
Hey, Brian! Brian!
Let's see if Peter gets to him in time. The episode starts with Quahog in the throes of a sweltering heat wave, and the Griffins are slowly melting. Everyone's at each other's throats, and then Peter walks in, excitedly waving a flyer for a dog show with a cash prize of 500 schmackaroos, which they can use to buy an air conditioner. Everyone looks to Brian.
Sorry, I don't do dog shows. It's not my thing.
All you gotta do is a few simple commands, maybe a trick or two.
Oh, come on, turn a few tricks for the fam. All right, that sounded a bit weird. You know what I mean. The Griffins plead with him until Brian gives in, and when Peter's overenthusiastic training becomes too much, Brian goes and grabs a cocktail. Lois tells her hubby to consider Brian's feelings, making him sulk. Next, she gifts Brian with an Italian collar, which, being the fancy boy he is, he absolutely loves. Then she says,
I know how hard you've been working, and well, the whole family appreciates it.
Thank you, Lois.
We'll be waiting downstairs whenever you're ready.
well, Lois is grateful. Not so sure about everyone else. At the dog show, Brian's anxiety is palpable as he feels out of place surrounded by regular dogs. He tells Peter that he doesn't think he can go through with this after all. His response? Telling Brian he can't back out now before offering him drugs. Next at showtime, as the announcer calls them up, getting Brian's name wrong in the process. But this does not stop Brian from absolutely killing it. He even stops for a quick cigarette break before completing his run. But the trouble starts when Peter tries to make him beg for a treat. Brian draws the line and storms off, embarrassing Peter by refusing to play the air quote good dog. So on the drive home, he confronts Brian.
How could you let me down like that, Brian?
Oh, I let you down. Why? Because I refused to demean myself?
This was the one thing I ever asked you to do for this family.
Yikes, man. Tension's thicker than a jumbo dog biscuit. This toxic back and forth goes on until Brian reaches his breaking point, demanding to be let out. On his walk home, a police officer stops Brian, using the word boy to emphasize his canine status, forces him to lie down, and escorts him home with a $10 ticket for a leash law violation, further damaging his relationship with Peter, who tells him,
He's the law outside this house, just like I'm the law inside this house.
Big man. Can't even afford to buy an air conditioner for your family. Jeez, what a...
The next day, Lois makes cinnamon buns, Brian's favorite, to cheer him up, in contrast to Peter, who just has a fresh tray of snark for his friend. They keep snapping at each other like a bunch of mean teenage girls until Lois begs them to chill. Brian says things cannot go back to the way they were after everything that's already happened, before Peter then delivers this low blow.
Get over it, Brian. When I found you, you were nothing but a stray.
You swore you would never speak of that.
Hey, at least he stayed true to his alcoholic roots. In the flashback, homeless Brian cleans Peter's windshield. Feeling bad about not having any cash, he invites the hound home. Now Peter tells him to sit down, eat his cinnamon bun, and stop being a bad dog. Well, as you can imagine, this deeply wounds Brian, which is ironic because his sign said that he'll sit for food. Well, not today, I guess. He leaves the house in a rage, leashless, and faces a series of humiliations. He's denied service at a store, chucked out of a restaurant, and to cap it all off,
Did he just drink from the fountain?
Hey, you! Stay!
knowing Brian, he's probably more hurt by the hot blonde snitching on him than the insane chase that ensues. He gets treated like a common stray, a far cry from the cultured, intellectual dog he considers himself to be. He ends up sleeping at a bus stop, a new low for him, but Brian's situation worsens when he's mistaken for a homeless man. A passerby treats him with contempt and Brian snaps, attacks the man, and gets taken to the pound where he gets sentenced.
Oh, he's cute. Aren't you precious? Lethal injection. Next.
Oh, you can't do this.
Ah, come on. Brian's more human than dog at this point. He shouldn't have been ostracized by humanity, and he certainly shouldn't be killed for having an issue with that. Good boy or bad boy, Brian's got a human conscience. Peter makes a desperate plea to the city council, who agree to hear Brian's case. So we get a montage of him prepping to defend himself to kill a mockingbird style. Then, before he really gets into his defense, the council says to take him away. Not interested in hearing the dog's legal expertise. Peter then gets up and says,
He's a member of our family first and a dog second. And I'm real sorry I forgot that, buddy. Sometimes we all need to forgive.
The council has no soul and still opts to send Brian the needle until Peter bribes them each $20. Greed triumphs over the heart, I guess. Brian is released and the town now treats him with newfound respect. Though, to be honest, this next one is going to make him wish he'd be painfully euthanized because things fall on the excruciating side of painful. Patriot Game shows us how the combination of Brian's horrible decision-making and Stewie's psychopathy flushes any chance of peace down the drain.
You like that? That feel good? That feel good? Where's my money?
It all starts with Brian placing a bet on a celebrity boxing match, but this isn't some shady back alley deal. No, he's taking the bet from Stewie. Not the judge, but Brian should know better than to gamble with an infant, especially one as deranged as Stewie is. But, to be fair, it does look like a no-brainer, as the fight is between Mike Tyson and Carol Channing, a Broadway legend who was 85 at the time. He puts $50 on Iron Mike Tyson before settling in to watch the one-sided match. We then watch as Mike pummels the living daylights out of this poor lady, which isn't a good look, but Channing's absorbing punches like a human sponge, leading to this masterpiece of absurdity.
I'm so exhausted.
And the winner, Carol, put on your Sunday clothes, Channing!
Guess she really rolled with the punches, no? Anyway, this unexpected turn of events leaves Brian in a rather uncomfortable financial position. Enters Stewie to collect Brian's $50, and Brian, clearly underestimating Stewie's seriousness, brushes him off. Then Stewie says he's got 24 hours to pay what he owes and keep everything peachy. 24 hours later, Brian comes out of the bathroom and Stewie reminds him that his grace period is up. Brian then suggests pushing the payment to next Friday. Big mistake, because Stewie ain't messing around as he unleashes his inner mobster.
Where's my money? You gonna give me my money? Where's my money, man? Where's the money?
This little guy's quite the psycho. I mean, it's only $50. $50 that Brian better get his hands on by 5 p.m. Otherwise, the tiny tyrant's gonna rock his frackin' rocker again. I think Stewie's overreacting here. Maybe a little bit. I mean, $50 is a lot of money to me. How many McChickens is that? Let me know in the comments. I really don't know. Later, we see that Brian didn't get his affairs in order because he's sneaking out of his room when he spots Stewie playing golf on the top of the stairs. Unfortunately, the fake mustache he slaps on does nothing to stop this from happening.
Where's my money? Where's my money? Yeah, you got money to pay for fake mustaches, huh? Yeah. How much you pay for that fake mustache?
Dang, diaper done. Take it easy, huh? So the torture escalates to cartoonish levels as Stewie shoots Brian's other knee, and as if that wasn't enough, he then pulls out a flamethrower, and, well, what do you do with flamethrowers aside from throwing some frackin' flames? At this point, Brian's probably wishing he'd just exit existence stage right. He finally caves, shocker, and agrees to pay Stewie back. Wait, he's had the money this whole time? Bro, I would've caved before he landed that first hit in the bathroom. So while all this ultra violence was going down, Peter got hired and in turn fired by the New England Patriots. Long story short, the Griffins are on their way to the UK for Peter's new contract. On the plane, I don't blame Brian for giving Stewie the cold shoulder. When he tells Stewie to piss off, a little fricker makes him an offer.
Piss off.
All right. You get one free revenge shot at me.
But I'm not going to tell you when it's coming.
Now, I'm not one to advocate for terrorizing toddlers, but Stewie totally deserves it. Stewie, now utterly paranoid about when Brian will exact his revenge, preemptively starts beating himself. It's a hilarious demonstration of how much Brian has gotten into Stewie's head. In the end, Brian suddenly delivers his payback by shoving Stewie in front of a double-decker bus as the family begins their trip back home. Speaking of trips, in a Seahorse Seashell Party, Brian decides to take a trip of a different kind when he eats some shrooms during a hurricane. And let's just say his experience is far from magical.
I'm gonna cut my ear off to prevent World War II.
Oh, God!
It was a dark and stormy night. The Griffins are watching TV as Tom Tucker announces that Hurricane Flozell is bearing down on Quahog, so everyone should stay indoors for the next 36 hours. Hearing this, Brian heads upstairs and takes a little baggie out of a secret stash spot in the floorboards. Stewie catches him in the act and asks him what he's up to which old Bri responds,
These are mushrooms. It's a psychedelic drug. Makes you see weird things, and I figure we're gonna be stuck inside for a while. It'll be a fun way to pass the time.
Well, if it works that way, we wouldn't be here talking about it, would we, pal? So Brian just chomps down a handful of shrooms, and the master of questionable decisions proceeds with his psychedelic adventure. He says, well, here you go, before they head downstairs. Famous last words, dude. Famous. With the TV signal gone, everyone's bored out of their rockers. Well, everyone except for Brian, because pretty soon he starts to feel a little groovy. First of all, never look at your hands. And secondly, how many did you frackin' take, dude? I mean, it's clear to see that Brian's not having a good time, but things take a turn for the worse when he cuts off his own ear. Dude's tripping balls. Stewie, surprisingly acting as the reasonable one, attempts to take care of Brian throughout the night. He tries to soothe him, keep him calm, generally prevent him from doing any more damage to himself. It's a real rare moment of genuine concern from Stewie towards Brian, but even he can't fully shield him from the horrors to come. Stewie's oddly soothing voice melts into the background as Brian descends into a self-inflicted, full-blown nightmare. Wait, is that Salvador Dali? Who is that? It's all shrooms and no magic as he's attacked by all kinds of monsters, including some demonic versions of the Griffins and Quagmire. You know, his bestie? They're all uttering distorted and creepy lines as Brian reaches the peak of his descent into pure psychological horror. Poor dude's gone through probably literal hell, but he finally makes it through and finally comes out of the other end, somewhat unscathed. I'm a little shocked at how good a trip sitter Stewie is when he brings Brian back to something that resembles reality by taking him downstairs for some water. Water. The real magic potion. Brian slowly regains his senses and emerges from his harrowing ordeal. While he's dealing with this internal chaos, Meg's busy having her very own meltdown, a stark contrast to Brian's drug-induced crisis. She's just plain wildin' at the rest of the family, but that's a story for another day. I'm glad to see Brian emerge in the kitchen after drinking the contents of the entire Pacific Ocean. It's well earned.
Hey everyone.
I don't know if he's ready to deal with the real Griffins, who are all monsters in their own special kind of way. I was afraid they'd harsh his mellow, but it looks like he's got this. Thank heavens, because that was a lot. Kind of like whatever Meg says to everyone to make them storm out of the room. Now, super zen, Brian has a deep conversation with Meg, who then realizes something about her role in the family.
Maybe if I feel bad, they don't have to.
You know, that's incredibly noble and mature, Meg. I think you might be the strongest person in this house.
I won't lie, I was afraid they'd make it out again, but thank Terrence McKenna, everyone's matured beyond that now. Next up, we go beyond. In Life of Brian, we see Brian Griffin finally get laid. Laid to rest.
Yes, Chris. I'm afraid that our Brian is dead.
We hit the ground running. Brian and Stewie do as they race through the streets, chased by two groups of furious Native Americans in jeeps. Their escape leads to a bridge, only to be cut off by a third group, also armed with machine guns. As they leap off the bridge to swim to safety, I can't help but wonder, what the hell did they do to piss off this many people? So it turns out that Stewie went back to 17th century Jamestown and armed the indigenous people.
Thanks to you, the Indians killed all the white people and took over America. I mean, you're the one who's always saying never alter the past.
Talk about cultural exchange, am I right? Next, we get a glimpse of this alternate America, complete with Native American-owned shops and even a Native American medical center. It's actually kind of progressive. Seeking safety, they attempt to return to their timeline, but their return pad is riddled with bullet holes. Stewie figures they'll need to visit this version of their house to find another one, and sneak into Native American Stewie's room, only to find a working time machine plus an intact return pad.
Look, there you are, giving them the guns. What the hell are you doing there?
See, told you Brian gets laid. Anyway, they recover the guns and return to their timeline just in the nick of time. A quick check confirms that everything is back to normal. Later, Brian walks past Stewie's room and hears a racket. He goes in and finds Stewie doing something out of character, destroying his time machine. Brian asks his little pal what's up, and he explains,
This time machine has almost killed us 100 times, Brian, so I've decided to get rid of it before something irreparable happens.
This is some dark irony, because little does he know that the real irreparable damage is just around the corner. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Stewie then says that he's had his fair share of fun with what Brian calls his crowning achievement. After destroying the time machine at the junkyard, they stumble upon a perfectly good street hockey net and decide to bring it home. Decked out in hockey gear, they head out for some fresh air and exercise, a seemingly harmless activity that sets the stage for this grim tragedy.
Brian, look out!
Oh my God!
That's gotta be one of the grisliest cartoon deaths ever, man. The Griffins are completely freaked out as they try to process this very sudden, very terrible incident. They rush Brian to the vet and sit in the waiting room to hear how their beloved Brian is doing. Meg asks her mom if she thinks he'll pull through, and she reassures her, saying that this is the best vet in Quahog, so Brian's getting the best care possible. After what I imagine felt like decades, the vet comes out and tells them that despite their best efforts, Brian's injuries are too serious for him to sustain life, so they better go in and say their goodbyes. The Griffins are bawling their eyes out. As the family gathers around to say their goodbyes, Brian musters all his strength to tell them,
"You've given me a wonderful life. I love you all."
This is without a doubt one of the worst things that has ever happened to Brian. It is such a gut punch for both the characters and the audience, especially Stewie, who's utterly broken by Brian's death. Expected for those going through grief, he blames himself for the street hockey and going to the dump. He then gets a glimmer of hope when he decides to rebuild the time machine to go back and save his friend. But it's very heartbreaking when he finds out he can't get a hold of a key component, and so he has to let fate do its thing. At the funeral, Peter here is finishing off his tearful eulogy by saying,
He was like a brother to me. I'm gonna spend the rest of my life missing him.
We're all gonna miss him, Peter. We're all gonna miss him very much.
Bro, what happened to this being a comedy? Needless to say, there isn't a dry eye in Quahog. Well, except for Quagmire, who just hates Brian. A month goes by after Brian's death, and the Griffins feel like it's time to get a new dog. That soon? I mean, like, maybe for a normal dog, but, like, it was Brian, man. They settle on a pussy hound called Vinny, a kind of tough guy with a New Jersey accent that wins everyone over, even Stewie eventually, just not initially. And thus here comes the reason why I'm not that broken up about this whole thing, is because his death, Brian's death, only lasts for 2 episodes, and then he comes back via Christmas Miracle. Speaking of sour moments, in The D in Apartment 23, Brian's getting 0 attention on Twitter until he tweets something prejudiced and gets more attention than he bargained for.
There he is!
Look whose shoddy writing is finally getting him noticed. We start with Brian driving Stewie to the kids' library, but our hound dog suggests that they hit up Quahog University instead. He claims it's more intellectually stimulating, but we all know he's just there to creep on college girls. After stacking up the L's like he's playing the world's biggest game of Jenga, they stumble upon a student protest. Seeing one last chance to impress the ladies, Brian revives his dormant Twitter account.
And tweeted. I am back in the game. See? Up, you're gone.
Bro should have just quit right there and then. But this is Brian we're talking about, so he pushes through, not letting silly things like shame and self-respect get in the way of his quest for online validation. At home, he reads his tweets to Stewie, who tells him that unless you're famous, no one really cares what you have to say on the platform. Brian tweets about everything from Kelly Ripa to Donald Trump, still no dice. 0 retweets, 0 likes, just actual bird sounds. Brian then goes to the movies, but wanting to hold over what fans he has for the 2 hours he'll be gone, he decides to post what'll become a fateful tweet.
About to see the new Kevin Hart movie. Just kidding. I'm white and went to college. Hashtag Baywatch.
Wow, I ain't going anywhere near that. Brian's tweet is straight up racist and totally unacceptable. It goes viral while he's in the theater, supposedly enjoying Akira Kurosawa's masterpiece Rashomon. Oh wait, it's fracking Baywatch. How highbrow. As Brian leaves the theater, he finally catches the eye of a cute co-ed who immediately tosses her drink in his face. Outside, an angry crowd confronts him about his tweet. His attempt to dismiss it as a joke backfires and they chase him home, starting his public downfall. Soon, the entire Griffin family's ostracized. Lois gets shunned at the grocery store. Jerome refuses to serve Peter at the clam, with Joe even threatening him with arrest. Even Chris and Meg gets in on the action at school, leading to one of the best fight sequences I've ever seen since Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. See? Chef's kiss choreography right there. We go back to Brian, who's still holed up in the Griffin home as a revolving group of protesters camp outside the house. Tired, Lois suggests that Brian make a public apology, and he goes out to the tough crowd. He starts his apology, but keeps getting interrupted, and eventually losing his temper and snapping at a heckler before going on this ill-informed and completely tone-deaf tirade.
I'm not a racist, all right? I just told a bad joke. Is this worth freaking out over? Or are there bigger problems in the world than this tweet?
His so-called real problems are rooted in the outdated ideas behind that garbage tweet. He tries to defend himself, claiming he loves black people because he watches tons of black corn, before throwing in that he kissed a trans woman. Oh frick, alright, he's legit. Oh sure, Brian's not a bigot. Let's break out the confetti, guys. So, big shocker, the crowd turns on him. Back inside, Lois gives him an earful for yelling black corn in front of children. When Brian insists he's not who people think he is, Lois fires back.
But you also haven't done much to prove that you aren't.
I know. All I have left is you guys. Thank God you have my back.
We think you should move out.
What?
I don't think she stuttered, bro. She explains that they love Brian, but they have to put their family's safety first. He's shocked and heartbroken, trying to change their minds as he packs his car, but Lois ain't budging. After saying their goodbye, there's a glimmer of hope when Stewie runs back to him, but he just rips off his collar saying it has their address written on it. Brian drives until he finds a rundown apartment, and the sleazy landlord tells him,
Apartment 23.
Oh, okay.
I just have one rule here. No kissing the mailman.
He heads upstairs and the conditions are just terrible. He's surrounded by noise, filth, dysfunction, just like the Griffin household. You'd think things couldn't get much worse, right? Oh, they can. And they do in Moving Out, Brian's song. The show's 100th episode where Brian's escape plan backfires spectacularly, making his living situation 100 times worse.
Brian, I want to introduce you to Joanna.
Maybe he just needs more beer. We open with Brian, Stewie, and Jillian chilling in the Griffin's living room watching TV. Peter enters and asks Jillian what they're doing later, and she tells him that they have tickets to Disney on Ice, making Peter gasp with FOMO. When Jillian picks up on her boyfriend's lack of interest, she offers his ticket to Peter. Later, Brian's on the couch writing when Lois comes and asks where his better half is. He says that she's with Lois's worse half, adding,
It's given me a chance to work on my novel, and I finally have a title. Faster Than the Speed of Love.
This guy just needs to throw his laptop in a lake or something, because that's just awful. Lois also isn't feeling it, because she practically laughs in his face. When she shares the plot, she points out it's just a copy of Iron Eagle, tickled by how terrible Brian's writing actually is. Over at the park, Peter and Jillian are having a blast after the show, feeding ducks and loving the fact that for once, they're not the dumbest people in the room. Just them and their 4 collective brain cells vibing. Peter tells her that she's a cat and she should give Brian an ultimatum, commit or quit. Later, we see that Brian got Jillian's message.
What the hell did you do? Because of what you said, Jillian wants us to move in together.
She's beautiful, she's funny, and she is smart as the day is wide.
Not so sure about that last one. I mean, she is dating your pet. Brian talks to Lois about it, and she tells him that he's not being fair to Jillian. Feeling guilty, Brian reluctantly agrees to get an apartment with her. Living with Jillian is better than Brian had ever expected, things going smoothly until Stewie drops by with his mail. A harsh reminder that rent ain't cheap. Desperate for help, Brian lets his pal, now flush with paper route cash, moving in, telling Jillian that,
Hope you don't mind Stewie staying with us for a little while. He just gets really lonely without me at home.
You're so fatherly. It really turns me on.
Careful what you wish for, sis. I've seen Brian-human hybrids before, it ain't pretty. He quickly learns that this is a big mistake, because Stewie's quite the little frackin' cock blocker, constantly making things super awkward. It all comes to a head one night when Stewie busts into Brian and Jillian's room while they're busy, When he says he's lonely, she feels for him and offers,
Come get in bed with us.
Ooh, all right, dear penthouse forum.
No, Stewie, go away.
Oh, he really shouldn't have said that. Left with no choice, he comes clean about a child paying for half of his rent and that he wasn't into moving in with her in the first place. Jillian's furious that Brian lied to her, so she dumps him. Got to Brian feeling sorry for himself, surrounded by empty beer cans, totally shattered about the breakup. Stewie then gives him some solid advice about moving on, which helps Brian realize he's now free and living in his own place. Next, Brian gets home and sees that Stewie's throwing a party at their place. This is meant to be for him to meet some women, get over Jillian, but Stewie's only invited a bunch of gay guys and this lady.
Brian, I want to introduce you to Joanna. Look out for this one.
Yikes! This makes Brian see just how cooked he is, and the next day we're back to drunk Brian surrounded by depression debris on his couch. Stewie's efforts to cheer him up with robots from 80s blockbusters only makes him even more mad and blames him for the breakup. Stewie snaps back that he needs to take responsibility and be a man if he wants to get her back. He should take some initiative. This motivates Brian to get off the couch, run to Jillian's new place, and knock on the door. When she opens, there's an awkward greeting, and then he pleads his case, saying he made a terrible mistake. To which she responds,
I met someone else.
Jillian, do you get the Oxygen Network?
Mayor West? To be honest, at least he's human, so that's a step in the right direction for her. Feeling defeated and heartbroken, Brian has no other option but to move back in with the Griffins. Lois tries to comfort him.
But it is good to have you back.
You know what the mistake was, moving in together?
Brother, huh? Peter's gotta be joking, man. He started this entire frickin' mess. Turns out Brian's coping mechanism is self-destruction. Next, in the Book of Joe, Brian decides to dip his paws into some physical agony by taking this marathon thing a bit too far.
Brian, Why does everything you touch turn to garbage?
For once, Stewie's on to something. Brian's hanging out with Stewie at a local coffee shop when his attention is suddenly drawn to a female runner, Chloe, who enters the cafe. He tells Stewie that he's completely obsessed with her, which, knowing Brian, kinda gives me anxiety. When his pint-sized BFF tells him to go and talk to her, he goes full Brian and pulls this utterly shameless maneuver.
Where are you going?
And 1,000. Phew!
1,000 what?
1,000 tons of bull crap, that's what. No harm could ever come from starting a relationship by lying through your teeth about who you are and what you've achieved. Stewie watches this disgraceful display with disdain. I can't believe my senses when Brian somehow manages to snag a date with Chloe. Later, he's all smiles as he rings her doorbell, but the vibe shifts when she proposes a run before dinner. Not wanting to blow his fit guy cover, Brian reluctantly goes along with it.
This is great, isn't it, Brian?
Yeah. Hey, is your vision also reduced to just a tiny pinhole?
Just push through it, Brian.
Push through it? Dude, I'm out of breath just watching this crazy day. It's obvious that this run's brutal for him. He's wheezing, his muscles are screaming, he's not looking too hot, but she tells him to hold out for that runner's high everyone yaps about. After an internal debate between his heart and Peter, for some odd reason, he pushes himself up the hill. Then, right when he's about to give up, he gets a flood of endorphins and starts tripping balls.
Go get him, Brian. By the way, the sun is really a black guy.
I knew it! Brian, being a low-key addict, is hooked on the rush of feel-good chemicals. Throw in the fact that they end up sleeping together and he's suddenly convinced he's Usain Bolt, spiraling into a full-blown running junkie. Almost immediately, running becomes like his entire personality. At dinner, he's kitted out in all of his fancy running gear and stretching, which makes Lois talk about how he's been doing a lot of running lately before asking him,
Why don't you have some food?
Oh, you mean fuel? No offense, Lois, but that stuff is nothing but chemicals and empty calories.
Just when you think this guy can possibly get even more insufferable, his weirdly snobbish reply also annoys Lois, and he shrugs it off. He then tells everyone that he and Chloe will be doing the Quahog Marathon soon and that they should come and support. Couple of days of fiendish training go by and he calls Stewie to come to the bathroom for a sec. When he gets there, he's greeted with this sight for sore eyes.
Oh my God! Brian, you're all sinewy. Your whole body looks like Paul McCartney's neck. Thanks.
I don't think that's a compliment, pal. Bro's out here looking like the Crypt Keeper. Brian must also be going for the gold and being freaking annoying, always going on about how much better he is than everyone else because he runs. I'm flabbergasted that he even dumps Chloe because she can't, quote-unquote, keep up with him. When Stewie says this isn't healthy, Brian brags about having a heart rate of 4 beats per minute, saying it means he's in amazing shape, completely delusional about the fact that he's destroying himself. The whole thing comes to a head at the Quahog Marathon, where Stewie, despite his concerns, goes to show his mummified friend some love. Then, as soon as the race starts, Brian instantly reaps the rewards of all of his unhinged training.
My leg! Help me, somebody!
So that's a painful, embarrassing, and completely predictable ending. The episode ends with Brian back at the Griffin's house, his leg in a cast, and then in some funny twist, Stewie's own ankle starts itching, which reminds me of another time Stewie had some itching. In The Hand That Rocks the Wheelchair, Brian's usual routine is switched to a more torture-based one, thanks to another one of Stewie's inventions.
What are you doing?
Oh boy, looks like this one ain't ending well for our K9, that's for sure. At the park, Brian's relaxing on a bench with the newspaper while Stewie works on a sandcastle. Their piece is interrupted when a kid destroys his masterpiece, forcing him to retaliate. He puts together an AK-47, but when he fires it at the bully, it explodes in his face. Brian checks on him, finding him dazed but unharmed. Shocked by what happens, Stewie processes everything and wonders what the issue could be. Brian then explains,
I think you're going soft. I mean, when was the last time you tried to blow something up or take over the world or even use the phrase damn you?
Oh, that's the last thing an evil genius wants to hear, and Stewie clearly is not pleased. Later, Brian wanders into his room to find him tinkering with a new contraption. Stewie begrudgingly admits to his friend that maybe he is losing his edge before revealing the Neural Enhancement Device, a machine designed to amplify his evil side. Brian then helps him activate the machine once he's inside, but we see that Stewie stays the exact same. They then leave to fetch the tools needed to adjust the machine, and moments later, it powers up again. Next morning, Brian's on the couch, absorbed in his TV show, when who he thinks is Stewie quietly slips into the room. However, something just feels off as he stands there staring at Brian, who is unaware, until he sees him with the corner of his eye, which startles him, and suddenly things take a sharp turn.
Ah!
Real Stewie then walks in to see Brian barely breathing, and when he loosens his collar, he snaps at his friend before chucking a battery at him. As he picks up the battery, Brian freezes. Evil Stewie stands right behind him. Brian then begs him to kill the clone, but Stewie insists on studying his creation. Before he can object, Evil Stewie viciously attacks his creator, horrifying Brian, and just when it seems like it's over, Evil Stewie storms out of the house, hell-bent on wrecking everything in his path. This forces Brian and Stewie to race through town, desperately trying to stop him from leveling all of Quahog. Surprise, surprise, Stewie blames Brian for everything, claiming that the whole Evil Stewie mess was all his fault because he called him soft, which is classic gaslighting because he literally made him. Fast forward to Brian tied to a pole in the park and shouting for Evil Stewie. Seeing our guy vulnerable finally draws him out of his hiding place. He steps out with his gun raised, wearing a grin so cold it'd make Mike Tyson flinch. Brian begs Stewie's evil twin to kill him, saying he's had enough of the Griffins. That's when they pulled this off. Didn't expect that, did ya? The two Stewies get into a frantic scramble for the gun, with Evil Stewie eventually gaining the upper hand. He fires a barrage of shots, which OG Stewie effortlessly dodges. As their fight rages on, Brian stealthily weakens his restraints, desperate to break free. After an aerial attack from his creator, the gun slips from Evil Stewie's grip and slides towards Brian's feet. Eventually, he manages to free himself. Oh, how the turntables! Now Brian can't figure out who's who, so he gives a simple command that only the real Stewie would catch on to, settling this clone issue once and for all. No more chopped tails, no more battery-clogged noses for him. But Brian ain't the only one who's taken a couple of plunges. Click the screen to see the worst things that have happened to Stewie.